When someone uses your past against you, what they are really doing is trying to decide who you are for you. They are trying to freeze you inside a version of yourself that no longer exists, because that version is familiar, predictable, and controllable. The present version of you makes them uncomfortable because it no longer fits the story they built in their head. And when people feel uncomfortable with your growth, they reach backward. They don't look at who you are now, they go digging for who you used to be. That is why they bring up your mistakes, your failures, your lowest moments. Not because those moments define you, but because those moments are the only place they still feel powerful. Your past becomes a weapon only when you let someone else hold it. The moment you defend it, explain it, apologize for it, or emotionally relive it, you give that person control. You step into their courtroom and accept their right to judge you. But you were never on trial. You were never required to prove that you outgrew something. Growth is not something you argue for. Growth is something that shows up quietly in your discipline, your consistency, your choices, and the way you carry yourself now. There is a difference between accountability and shame, and most people confuse the two. Accountability is power. Shame is submission. Accountability says, yes, that happened. I learned and I changed. Shame says I am still that person and I must keep paying for it. People who want to control you will always push you toward shame because shame keeps you small, quiet, and apologetic. Accountability, on the other hand, makes you grounded, steady, and immune to manipulation. When someone throws your past in your face, they are trying to collapse time. They want yesterday to outweigh today. They want an old version of you to speak louder than the person you are right now. That only works if you let it. The strongest response is not anger. It is not defense. It is not explanation. It is calm ownership. Yes, that happened, and this is who I am now. There is no argument in that. There is no opening for debate. It is a statement of reality. Most people panic when their past is mentioned because they are afraid it will undo everything they've built. But nothing you have grown into can be erased by something you outgrew. The only way your past can hurt you is if you still emotionally live inside it. When you truly move on, your past loses its power to provoke you. It becomes information instead of identity. People who are secure in who they are do not flinch when their history is mentioned. They do not get loud. They do not scramble to correct the record. They simply stand where they are. And that steadiness communicates something powerful. I am not afraid of where I came from because I know where I am. Those who try to drag you backward are usually stuck there themselves. They replay the same memories, the same stories, the same grievances, because that is where their identity lives. Your growth threatens them. It shows them that change is possible. It reminds them that staying the same was a choice. So they try to keep you emotionally tied to who you were so they don't have to confront who they didn't become. When someone brings up your past, listen carefully. You will hear fear underneath their words. Fear that you are no longer accessible. Fear that you no longer play the role they expect. Fear that they can no longer define you. So they reach for the only thing they think still works, the old version of you. But that version is gone. You do not have to convince anyone that you changed. People who are paying attention already know. The rest are not interested in the truth. They are interested in keeping you where they feel safe. That is why no amount of explanation ever satisfies them. They don't want clarity. They want control. That is also why arguing about your past never works. You can list every lesson you learned, every way you improved, every step forward you took, and it will still not be enough for someone who is invested in keeping you small. Their goal is not to understand. Their goal is to remind you of who you were so you forget who you are. The most powerful thing you can do is refuse to emotionally revisit places you no longer live. You do not owe anyone a reenactment of your worst moments. You do not owe anyone proof of your evolution. You do not owe anyone access to old pain so they can feel justified in their judgment. Calm authority does not explain itself, it simply stands. There is a reason people who have truly grown seem untouchable. It is not because they have no past, it is because they have made peace with it. Nothing unsettles someone who knows their story. Nothing shakes someone who has already faced themselves. When you own your history, no one else can use it as leverage. Ownership turns accusations into noise. The moment you say, yes, that happened and I learned from it, you remove their power to shame you. They can't expose something you already accept. They can't threaten you with something you've already integrated. Your past is not a stain, it is a record of survival. It shows what you endured, what you misunderstood, what you outgrew. Every mistake you made taught you something. Every failure shaped your perspective. Every regret refined your judgment. That is not weakness. That is wisdom earned the hard way. But the world is full of people who don't want you wise. They want you unsure. They want you doubting yourself. They want you looking backward instead of forward. Because someone who looks forward is hard to control. So when they bring up your past, do not shrink. Do not stiffen. Do not argue. Just stand in the present. Let your tone be steady. Let your posture be calm. Let your words be simple. Yes, that happened. This is who I am now. And then let silence do the rest. Because silence after ownership is terrifying to someone who hoped to provoke shame. They expected emotion. They expected defense. They expected you to crumble. But instead, they get someone who is unmoved, and that forces them to face the truth they were trying to avoid. You are no longer available for manipulation. Your growth is not up for debate. The reason this works is because human beings respond to energy more than words. When you are calm and grounded about your past, it signals that you have nothing to hide and nothing to prove. That energy is disarming. It shuts down attacks without you having to fight back. People who are used to controlling others through guilt and shame don't know what to do with someone who is emotionally neutral about their history. There is nothing to grab onto, no wound to press, no insecurity to exploit. That is why the real work is not in crafting the perfect response. It is in healing the part of you that still feels threatened by your past. When you are no longer ashamed of who you were, no one can use it against you. Shame is what keeps old stories alive. Ownership is what closes them. You do not become powerful by pretending you were always perfect. You become powerful by knowing you were not and growing anyway. That kind of honesty is unshakable. It does not crack under criticism. It does not fold under judgment. It simply exists. And that is what people feel when they try to pull you backward and fail. They feel that you are no longer there. They are talking to someone who has moved on. They are speaking to a version of you that no longer responds to old scripts. And that is when they lose their grip. The moment someone realizes they can no longer control you with your past is the moment they feel the loss of power. And power for insecure people is not about leadership or respect. It is about leverage. They need something to hold over you so they can stay above you. That is why they keep old stories alive. That is why they repeat the same moments, the same mistakes, the same accusations. Not because they care about what happened, but because they care about how it makes you feel now. They are trying to get a reaction. They are trying to pull you back into a version of yourself that was uncertain, apologetic, and emotionally available to their judgment. They want you to flinch. They want you to explain. They want you to defend. Because the moment you do, they know they still have access to you. But when you stay calm, something different happens. When you don't rush to correct them, they feel unsettled. When you don't collapse into guilt, they feel exposed. When you don't argue, they lose their footing. Because their entire strategy relies on you believing that your past still defines you. This is why silence is so powerful in these moments. Not passive silence, not avoidance, but grounded silence. The kind that comes from someone who knows who they are. When you don't fill the space with justification, you force the other person to sit with their own intent. They either have to escalate or retreat, and both reveal more about them than about you. Most people never learn this because they are afraid silence looks like guilt. But guilt is loud, it scrambles, it over-explains. Silence, when it is calm, communicates certainty. It says, I am not afraid of what you're saying because I know who I am. When someone says, you've always been like this, they are trying to trap you in permanence. They are saying you don't change. But the truth is, everything alive changes. The only people who say you never change are the ones who need you not to. Because your change disrupts the roles they built around you. So instead of arguing about whether you've changed, you let your life speak. You let your choices speak. You let your consistency speak. You don't beg someone to update their image of you. If they are paying attention, they already have. If they are not, nothing you say will force them to. This is one of the hardest things to accept. Some people are not in a relationship with who you are. They are in a relationship with who you used to be. And when you outgrow that version, they feel like they lost something. But what they lost was not you. It was access to you. And access is what manipulators miss the most. When you were uncertain, they could influence you. When you were apologetic, they could control you. When you were ashamed, they could keep you small. But when you are steady, those doors close. That is why they bring up your past when you start setting boundaries. They are not nostalgic. They are threatened. You see this everywhere. A friend who used to benefit from your people-pleasing starts mentioning how you used to always be there for them. A partner who relied on your insecurity brings up old mistakes when you start asserting yourself. A family member who once dismissed you suddenly reminds you of who you used to be when you stop tolerating disrespect. They are not remembering. They are resisting. They are resisting the new dynamic where you no longer bend. That is why you must never apologize for growth. Growth is not betrayal. Growth is not abandonment. Growth is you becoming who you were meant to be. And anyone who needs you to stay broken so they can feel comfortable was never on your side. You do not owe anyone loyalty to your old self. The strongest people understand this. They do not keep proving that they have changed. They simply live in a way that makes the question irrelevant. Their boundaries are firm, their tone is calm, their energy is grounded, and that combination makes it impossible for others to drag them backward. Think about how confident people move. They don't rush. They don't justify. They don't get pulled into emotional arguments about who they used to be. They know that their current presence already answers the question. So when someone tries to weaponize your past, the goal is not to win the argument. The goal is to stay in your power, and power is not loud. It is still. Stillness is what unsettles people who are trying to provoke you. They want motion. They want reaction. They want to see that they can still move you emotionally. But when you stay still, They have nothing to push against. This is not about being cold. It is about being anchored. It is about knowing that you don't have to participate in every story someone tells about you. Not every memory deserves your energy. Not every accusation deserves your attention. Not every opinion deserves a response. Some things are meant to be left where they belong, in the past. The reason this takes so much emotional maturity is because our instinct is to be understood. We want people to see our growth. We want them to acknowledge how far we've come. But that desire can trap us, because if someone is committed to misunderstanding you, your effort only feeds their control. You don't have to be seen by everyone to be real. You don't have to be validated to be grounded. You don't have to be believed to be confident. Your job is not to manage other people's narratives about you. Your job is to live in alignment with who you are becoming. That is why boundaries matter so much when it comes to the past. A boundary is not an argument. It is a line. It says this is where the story ends. When someone keeps bringing up your past, a boundary might sound like, I'm not discussing that anymore, or that's not who I am now, or sometimes nothing at all. Boundaries do not need drama to be effective. They only need consistency. And when you stop engaging with old stories, people either adjust or disappear. Both are outcomes of growth. Some people will rise with you. They will see your change and respect it. Others will try harder to pull you back. They will increase the pressure. They will bring up more memories. They will test your resolve. That is when you know the boundary is working. Because resistance always appears right before control is lost. And when you hold your ground through that discomfort, something shifts. They realize the old levers no longer work. They may get angry. They may accuse you of being different. They may say you changed. They're right, you did. And that is exactly why you are no longer available for the version of the relationship that was built on your past. One of the most dangerous lies people believe about their past is that they owe someone permanent access to it. As if making a mistake once means you must forever be open to judgment. As if struggling at one point means you must always be defined by that struggle. That belief keeps people trapped. It keeps them apologizing long after they've already changed. It keeps them explaining things that no longer exist. And it keeps them emotionally tied to people who refuse to see them clearly. You don't owe anyone a lifetime subscription to your worst moments. You are allowed to evolve without bringing everyone with you. You are allowed to close chapters without rerating them for an audience. People who demand access to your past are often trying to avoid facing their own. It is easier to point at who you were than to look at who they are. It is easier to remind you of your mistakes than to acknowledge their stagnation. So they keep you busy defending yourself so you don't notice the imbalance. But once you become aware of this dynamic, it changes everything. You start to see that the argument is not about truth. It is about positioning. They want to be above you. They want you below them. And your past is the ladder they are using to climb. So you stop climbing with them. You stop participating in comparisons that no longer apply. You stop measuring your present against someone else's memory. And when you do, you become untouchable in a way that most people never experience. This is where calm authority is born. Not from proving, not from persuading, not from convincing, but from knowing. When someone brings up your past and you respond without emotion, without defensiveness, without apology, you send a message that is impossible to fake. You say, this no longer lives inside me. And when something no longer lives inside you, no one can use it against you. That is the difference between healed and hurting. Healed people don't flinch when their history is mentioned. Hurting people do. Because hurting people still feel like that past is happening now. So the real work is not learning what to say. The real work is releasing the part of you that still feels ashamed. Because the moment you truly accept your past, it loses all leverage. That acceptance is not resignation. It is power. It is you saying, yes, that was part of my story. It made me who I am, and I do not need to punish myself for it. Punishment is what manipulators rely on. They want you to feel like you deserve to be talked down to. They want you to feel like you owe them patience while they disrespect you. They want you to feel like you must earn your place now because you were imperfect before. But nobody earns the right to be treated with dignity. Dignity is not a reward. It is a baseline. Your growth does not make you arrogant. Your boundaries do not make you cold. Your refusal to be dragged in the past does not make you dishonest. It makes you self-respecting. And self-respect is what changes how people treat you. Because when you respect yourself, you no longer accept conversations that are designed to shrink you. You no longer engage with narratives that don't reflect your reality. You no longer tolerate being reduced to who you were when you know who you are. That shift is quiet but radical. It means you stop negotiating with people who are not interested in meeting you where you stand. It means you stop over-explaining to people who already decided who you are. It means you stop letting old versions of yourself dictate how you show up now. There is a strange freedom that comes with being misunderstood. It forces you to decide whose opinion actually matters. And when you realize that most people are speaking from their own fears, not from your truth, you stop trying to fix their perception. You let them keep their story. You keep your life. And that separation is where peace lies. When someone tries to shame you with your past, what they are really saying is that they are uncomfortable with your present. They are unsettled by your confidence. They are threatened by your stability. They are intimidated by your growth. So they look for cracks. They look for anything that might make you doubt yourself. And when they can't find anything current, they reach backward. But that only works if you follow them there. You don't have to. You can stand right where you are and let them speak to someone who no longer exists. That is not cruelty. That is clarity. You are not required to emotionally revisit old pain so someone else can feel powerful. You are not obligated to defend your evolution. You are not responsible for someone else's inability to see you as you are. You are only responsible for staying aligned with your truth. And your truth is not who you were. Your truth is who you have become. There comes a moment in every person's growth when you realize something quietly devastating. Some people only loved the version of you that didn't know their worth. They were comfortable when you doubted yourself. They felt safe when you over-explained. They enjoyed your availability when you had no boundaries. But the moment you started standing taller, speaking calmer, and choosing yourself, something in them shifted. Not because you became worse, but because you became harder to control. And when control disappears, some people reach for the past like a weapon. They will bring up who you were, what you did, what you said, how you failed, not because it matters, but because it once worked. It once made you shrink. It once made you apologize. It once made you doubt. But you are not that person anymore. That is the part they cannot accept. You don't owe them the comfort of staying familiar. Growth is unfamiliar to people who live in repetition. Change feels like betrayal to people who depend on you staying predictable. And confidence feels like arrogance to people who benefited from your insecurity. So they try to guilt you back into the role they prefer. But here is the truth most people never say out loud. When someone keeps dragging you into your past, they are trying to regain emotional leverage. They want to feel taller than you again. They want to feel superior. They want to remind you of a time when you were easier to manipulate. That is not love. That is fear. And fear has a loud voice. It will accuse. It will distort. It will exaggerate. It will rewrite history if it has to. But fear cannot survive calm clarity. When you no longer react emotionally to your past being mentioned, something powerful happens. You take the oxygen out of their tactic. You show them that their old tools don't work anymore. And people hate that, not because you are wrong, but because you are free. Freedom is uncomfortable to people who are still imprisoned by their own unresolved stories. So you must decide something very important. Will you keep letting people define you by chapters you already closed? Or will you start living as the person you are now? You cannot do both. If you continue to emotionally revisit who you were every time someone brings it up, you will never fully inhabit who you are becoming. You will always be 1 foot in the past and 1 foot in the present, and that split will exhaust you. Peace comes when you fully move forward, not by denying your history, but by no longer living inside it. Your past happened, you learned, you changed, that is the end of its power. Anything beyond that is someone else trying to use it, and you don't have to participate. You don't need a speech. You don't need a defense. You don't need to convince anyone. Your presence alone tells the truth. The way you speak now, the way you hold yourself now, the way you make decisions now, the way you refuse chaos now. That is your evidence. And evidence does not argue. It simply exists. The people who truly see you will notice the difference. They will recognize your discipline, your maturity, your boundaries. They will feel your stability, and they will respect you for it. The people who don't will keep reaching backward. Let them. You don't have to follow. Because every time you stay in the present while someone else is stuck in the past, you are silently declaring something powerful. I am no longer available for that version of myself. And when you make that declaration consistently, the world adjusts. One of the most important shifts you will ever make is realizing that not every accusation deserves your emotional energy. Some people don't bring up your past because they want closure or understanding. They bring it up because they want a reaction. They want to see if they can still make you flinch. They want to know if they still have access to the version of you that felt small. When you react, you answer that question for them. When you stay calm, you close the door. This is why emotional control is not about suppressing feelings. It's about choosing where your feelings get invested. You don't owe your nervous system to someone who is trying to provoke you. You don't owe your peace to someone who refuses to respect it. Your calm is not weakness. It is discipline. It is you saying, I know who I am and I don't need to prove it under pressure. People who live in chaos don't understand calm. They interpret it as distance. They interpret it as arrogance. They interpret it as coldness. But what it really is self-respect. It is the refusal to be emotionally yanked back into a version of yourself that no longer fits. You are not required to be emotionally available to people who only show up to criticize you. You are not obligated to open your heart to someone who uses it as leverage. You are not selfish for protecting your growth. You are wise, and wisdom often looks quiet. When someone tries to shame you with your past, the strongest response is not a clever comeback. It's grounded neutrality. It's a steady tone. It's a calm acknowledgement without self-betrayal. Yes, that happened, and this is who I am now. No drama, no argument, no explanation, just truth. That truth creates an invisible wall. It separates who you are from who you are, and people can feel that boundary even if you never say it out loud. Boundaries are not built through confrontation. They are built through consistency, through what you tolerate, through what you ignore, through what you no longer react to. When you stop engaging with old narratives, they lose momentum. People get bored of stories that don't get a response. They move on, or they reveal themselves. Either way, you win, because you are no longer available for manipulation. There is something deeply empowering about not being emotionally hookable, about not letting someone's words hijack your state of mind, about being able to sit in your own truth even when someone else is uncomfortable with it. That kind of power cannot be taken. It has to be given. And you stop giving it the moment you stop explaining yourself. There is a quiet moment that happens inside you when you finally stop needing to be understood by everyone. It's subtle, but once it happens, you never go back. It's the moment you realize that peace is more valuable than being right, and self-respect is more important than being validated. This is where true emotional independence begins. Most people spend their lives trying to correct how they are perceived. They explain, clarify, defend, and justify, all in the hope that someone else will finally see them the way they see themselves. But the hard truth is this: not everyone wants to understand you. Some people want to categorize you, some want to judge you, some want to control you, and no amount of explaining will change that. When you accept this, something shifts. You stop performing, you stop persuading, you stop chasing agreement, and you start standing still in who you are. That stillness is powerful, because when you no longer need approval, you are no longer emotionally dependent on anyone's opinion. You listen, but you don't collapse. You hear criticism, but you don't internalize it. You acknowledge disagreement, but you don't let it rewrite your identity. This is what it means to be emotionally sovereign. Your past is no longer a wound that can be reopened. It is a closed chapter that taught you how to read the next one better. And when someone tries to pull you back into that old story, you can feel the difference. It doesn't sting the way it used to. It doesn't shake you the way it once did, because you are not living there anymore. You're here, and here is solid. People who rely on your guilt will feel your shift before you ever speak it. They will sense that their old tactics don't land, that their accusations don't echo, that their reminders don't penetrate, and that will frustrate them. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because you are no longer doing what they expect. Freedom disrupts patterns, especially unhealthy ones, so they might push harder at first, they might get louder, they might bring up more. But this is just the last gasp of a dynamic that is dying, and you don't have to fight it, you just have to not feed it. Let them speak. Let them repeat. Let them remember. You stay present. You stay steady. You stay rooted in who you are now, and that grounded presence is the strongest boundary you will ever have. There is a kind of strength that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't demand to be recognized. It simply exists. And when you reach this level of inner stability, something remarkable happens. People can no longer move you the way they used to. Not because they stopped trying, but because you stopped responding. This is what it means to outgrow your past. Not to pretend it didn't happen, not to rewrite it, not to erase it, but to no longer emotionally live inside it. You don't feel the need to defend that version of yourself because you're not attached to it anymore. You've integrated it. You've learned from it. You've moved forward. And that creates a kind of emotional distance that is healthy. When someone brings up who you were, they're speaking to a ghost, a memory, a version of you that no longer has a voice because it no longer needs one. You are not here to argue with ghosts. You are here to live. Most people don't realize how much energy they waste fighting old labels. They spend years trying to prove they are no longer who someone decided they were. But the truth is, the people who are committed to misunderstanding you will never update their perception. They don't want to. It keeps their world simple. Let it. Your life is not a democracy. You do not need consensus to evolve. You don't need permission to grow. You don't need approval to change. And you certainly don't need to carry someone else's outdated view of you like a burden. When you stop carrying it, you feel lighter. Not because you became indifferent, but because you became grounded. You know who you are. And that knowing is calm, not defensive. This is where you start to notice something else. The people who truly respect you don't bring up your past to shame you. They acknowledge your growth. They see the work. They feel the difference. And they meet you in the present. Everyone else is just noise, and noise doesn't require a response. One of the clearest signs that you have truly grown is that your past no longer feels like a threat. It doesn't make your chest tighten. It doesn't make your voice change. It doesn't make you feel small. It feels like a story you once lived, not a place you still reside. This is emotional closure. Not because everything was fair, not because everything was resolved, but because you no longer need to revisit it to feel whole. When someone brings up who you were, you don't rush to correct them. You don't scramble to defend yourself. You don't feel the need to explain your evolution. You simply remain where you are, and that stillness speaks louder than anything you could say. There is a kind of confidence that comes from knowing you've done the work. You don't need anyone else to validate it. You feel it in how you think, in how you react, in how you choose, in how you walk away from things that once consumed you. That confidence cannot be shaken by someone else's memory, because memory is static, but you are not. People who cling to your past are frozen. They are holding on to a version of you because it keeps their story intact. It keeps them comfortable. It keeps them from having to adjust to your growth. But you are not here to preserve their comfort. You are here to live your life. And living your life means letting some people be left behind emotionally, even if they are still physically present. That doesn't make you cruel. It makes you honest. You are honest about where you are now. You are honest about what you will no longer tolerate. You are honest about the fact that you have changed. And change is not something you apologize for. It is something you honor. The more you practice standing in your present self, the more effortless it becomes. You start to notice that most confrontations about your past are not actually about you. They are projections of someone else's fear, resentment, or insecurity. They are attempts to control a narrative that you no longer belong to. And the moment you recognize this, the power dynamic shifts entirely. You no longer feel compelled to defend yourself because you understand who holds the real authority, yourself. The moment you give someone else the ability to make you feel guilty, small, or defensive, you are handing them control over your energy. But when you withhold reaction, when you respond with calm, when you simply continue walking forward, you reclaim that energy. You reclaim your authority. It is also important to realize that growth is inherently self-evident. You do not need to narrate it. You do not need to justify it. Every disciplined habit, every step forward, every boundary you maintain is proof enough. Actions always outweigh explanations. Words can be twisted, misinterpreted, or weaponized. Actions, however, cannot. They speak for themselves and leave no room for debate. When someone confronts you with your past, consider it an opportunity to exercise this principle. Pause, breathe. Assess whether a response is necessary at all. Often, the best response is silence or a calm acknowledgement that does not engage in defense. A simple, "I hear you," or "that chapter is closed" can be more powerful than a 10-minute explanation. It signals control, maturity, and self-respect. People often forget that emotional reactions are invitations. Every time you get defensive, upset, or flustered, you are giving someone else the keys to your emotional state. You are allowing them to dictate the terms of your presence. When you respond calmly, you take back those keys. You dictate the rhythm. You dictate the tone. You dictate the energy. Growth also requires patience because people who cling to your past may persist. They may continue to bring it up, hoping to provoke a reaction. But patience paired with calm discipline is unbeatable. It sends a clear message. The past no longer controls you, and no one can leverage it against you. This is the ultimate demonstration of strength, not confrontation, not argument, but quiet, consistent presence. Your life is an evolving story, and you are the author. You get to decide which chapters matter today. You get to determine how much attention old mistakes or criticisms receive. You have the power to select which voices are allowed to influence your state of mind, and which voices you listen to only as background noise. This selective engagement is not avoidance, it is strategy. It is choosing battles that are worth your energy and refusing battles that are designed to drain it. Ultimately, your past is a resource, not a prison. Each mistake, each lesson, each success adds depth to who you are today. When someone tries to weaponize it, you recognize the attempt for what it is. You meet it with calm authority, not defensiveness. And by doing so, you protect your peace, maintain your dignity, and reinforce the boundaries that keep your growth intact. The key is consistency. Repeatedly responding in calm, grounded ways teaches people that your energy cannot be stolen by their attempts to manipulate or shame. Over time, this becomes a part of your presence, a silent but undeniable signal of your sovereignty. Your past is acknowledged, your peace is non-negotiable. As you continue to practice responding with calm authority, you begin to notice the subtle shifts in interactions. People who once sought to provoke you start to recalibrate. They realize that their usual tactics no longer yield the reaction they expected. Their attempts to manipulate, shame, or control are met with steady presence, not panic, not defensiveness, not over-explanation. And in that realization, a quiet power emerges for you, one that is unshakable because it is rooted in internal clarity rather than external approval. This is the turning point where true emotional independence solidifies. You no longer allow the words or judgments of others to dictate your sense of self. You understand that opinions are just that, opinions, often clouded by bias, past experiences, or insecurity. And while you can respect someone's right to hold an opinion, you are not required to accept it as a reflection of your reality. Every time you maintain your calm in the face of provocation, you teach not only yourself, but also others how you expect to be treated. Your boundaries are reinforced through consistent action, not through arguments or explanations. You are effectively training people to engage with you on your terms, setting a new standard for interaction that centers around respect and understanding rather than conflict and control. There is also a deeper, almost spiritual layer to this practice. By refusing to defend yourself unnecessarily, you conserve your energy for what truly matters. Your focus shifts from reacting to growing, from explaining to building, from defending to creating. Every moment spent in unnecessary justification is energy diverted from progress, and when you reclaim that energy, you reclaim your life. You also develop an acute awareness of patterns. You begin to recognize recurring behaviors and intentions in others. When someone repeatedly tries to draw you into old arguments, to weaponize your past, or to unsettle you with accusations, you no longer fall for it. You see the pattern before it unfolds, and you prepare yourself to respond in ways that preserve your peace. This foresight is a form of mastery. It is the ability to navigate human interaction without losing control of your internal state. It is essential to remember that silence is a tool, not a surrender. Remaining quiet in the face of criticism does not imply agreement or submission. It implies mastery. It communicates, I am secure enough in my truth not to be swayed by noise. I am confident enough in my growth not to be shaken by judgment. This is a form of communication that transcends words. It resonates through posture, tone, and action, leaving a lasting impression far greater than any defense could achieve. Moreover, by exercising this restraint consistently, you attract people who respect your integrity. Those who value control, manipulation, or conflict naturally step away, while those who appreciate authenticity, accountability, and strength are drawn toward you. Your presence becomes a filter, a subtle, powerful boundary that shapes the quality of relationships and interactions in your life. Growth, accountability, and boundaries are not abstract ideals, they are daily practices. Each choice you make, each interaction you navigate, each temptation to defend yourself you resist reinforces these principles. Over time, these practices accumulate into a reputation of steady strength. You become known not for how loudly you defend yourself, but for how consistently you embody your values. This consistency is what ultimately protects you from the weight of the past. Mistakes, missteps, or judgments from others lose their power when your present actions clearly demonstrate who you are today. The more disciplined you are in holding this space, the less influence outdated perceptions have. And as your peace grows, so too does your confidence, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of strength, clarity, and authority. With each passing day, the habit of standing firm in your present self becomes more ingrained. It becomes second nature to observe without reacting, to listen without justifying, to act without seeking approval. This level of self-mastery is not instantaneous. It is cultivated through repeated choices, small and large, that prioritize clarity, peace, and integrity over immediate satisfaction or validation. One of the most transformative realizations is understanding that defending yourself often prolongs the very conflict you wish to end. Every argument, every explanation, every attempt to prove your point gives life to the negative energy that others try to impose. By choosing restraint, you cut that energy off at the source. You stop feeding the fire and allow it to dissipate naturally. At first, this approach may feel counterintuitive. Human instinct pushes us toward defense. We want to explain to correct, to make sure the truth is seen. But experience teaches that explanation rarely changes perception. People see what they want to see. They interpret through the lens of their beliefs, biases, and emotions. No amount of words can alter that. What words cannot achieve, presence can. What proof cannot cement, consistent action demonstrates. Silence, steady composure, and clear boundaries are not passive. They are active forms of resistance against unnecessary manipulation. They communicate self-respect without confrontation, authority without aggression, and confidence without arrogance. When you consistently embody these principles, you create an unshakable foundation for your life that cannot be undermined by the judgments or attacks of others. Consider also the liberation that comes from releasing the need for approval. Much of the human tendency to defend oneself is rooted in fear of rejection, misunderstanding, or judgment. These fears are rooted in the past, conditioned by experience, and reinforced by societal expectations. But once you internalize your own worth, once you recognize that your life, choices, and growth are yours to own, these fears lose their grip. You stop seeking validation from those who were never invested in your well-being. This shift in perspective also redefines how you engage with your past. Your history is no longer a liability, it is a source of wisdom. Mistakes and failures are not chains but teachers. Each lesson learned strengthens your resilience and informs your decisions. By acknowledging your past without allowing it to dominate your present, you create space for intentional growth and purposeful living. In practice, this means responding differently when confronted. Instead of reacting impulsively to accusations, you pause. Instead of defending your every action, you evaluate whether a response is necessary. And when it is, your words are measured, your tone calm, and your intent clear. You communicate from a place of authority, not anxiety from confidence, not fear from clarity, not confusion. The ripple effects of this approach are profound. Relationships improve because interactions are based on mutual respect rather than conflict. Your energy is preserved for pursuits that truly matter. And over time, a reputation for integrity, steadiness, and quiet strength naturally forms. People learn that you are not swayed by petty attacks or past mistakes. They recognize that your presence is anchored in reality, not perception. This is the essence of personal power, holding your ground without aggression, guiding your interactions without coercion, and letting your growth speak louder than any explanation could. As your practice deepens, you begin to notice a profound shift in how you experience conflict, criticism, and judgment. Situations that once provoked immediate reactions now become opportunities for demonstration of composure and clarity. The more you integrate calm restraint into your responses, the more automatic it becomes, creating a natural buffer between external chaos and your internal state. You realize that every encounter is not a test of your worth, but a reflection of the other person's perspective. People may project their insecurities, attempt to control, or cling to outdated perceptions of you, but their behavior is not a measure of your value. Recognizing this frees you from the trap of emotional reactivity. You no longer need to defend, justify, or over-explain. Instead, you focus on what truly matters: your actions, your growth, and your peace. The concept of controlling the frame becomes second nature. Conversations, arguments, and even casual discussions often operate within unspoken frames. Expectations about how you should respond, who holds authority, and what constitutes the truth. By consciously refusing to step into frames that undermine your authority, you assert control without aggression. Simple phrases like, "I hear that," or "that's an interesting perspective," allow you to acknowledge the other person without surrendering your power. Questions like, "Can you clarify what you mean?" shift accountability back to them and prevent you from being trapped in defensive loops. Boundaries become clearer and more effortless. You learn to recognize when someone is attempting to provoke or manipulate and respond in ways that reinforce your limits without confrontation. This consistency over time teaches others how to interact with you while simultaneously strengthening your self-respect. Boundaries are no longer fragile constructs requiring constant defense. They are steady pillars that protect your energy and align with your values. Equally important is the understanding that silence is a powerful tool. Choosing not to respond hastily does not imply weakness or avoidance. It demonstrates mastery over self. Silence allows you to observe, process, and respond intentionally. It communicates confidence because it shows that your presence, actions, and decisions are sufficient to convey your truth. When words are unnecessary, they are replaced by the language of disciplined action and steady presence. The interplay between accountability and growth is also critical. Owning your past mistakes and taking responsibility for your actions demonstrates integrity, but it does not require apology for the sake of appeasement. Accountability is internal, rooted in self-awareness and commitment to personal evolution. When coupled with boundaries and calm restraint, it forms an unassailable foundation for confidence. Shame, on the other hand, is optional. It only has power if you allow it. Choosing accountability over shame liberates you from the control others may attempt to exert through judgment or criticism. Over time, you begin to notice subtle transformations in your relationships, professional life, and self-perception. People who respect strength, clarity, and authenticity gravitate toward you, while those who seek control, conflict, or manipulation naturally step back. Your energy becomes reserved for interactions that are productive and aligned with your purpose, and this intentional engagement enhances your effectiveness, focus, and well-being. Another profound realization emerges: your past is not a prison, it is a teacher. Every mistake, misstep, or challenge has shaped your understanding, strengthened your resolve, and provided wisdom that guides your present actions. When someone attempts to use your past against you, you recognize that their words are projections of fear or resistance to your progress. Your calm response, grounded presence, and clear boundaries neutralize their attempts and preserve your peace. Through repeated practice, these principles integrate into your identity. Responding without defensiveness, maintaining boundaries without aggression, and allowing actions to speak louder than words becomes instinctive. You no longer feel compelled to justify yourself to those unwilling to understand, and you experience a profound sense of liberation from the need for external validation.